Welcome to track 2 of the 2020 ISO sector auditor training. Um, we begin this sector, we will cover just an overview of BOSS. BOSS has not been implemented into the ISO sector yet, but I do want to just cover some high points and maybe some timing as far as what's going on. I do want to take an opportunity also from a training perspective to talk about certification scope statements. In track 1, I did mention that there was a potential for an A&AB audit finding related to scope statement on a medical certificate. So I want to touch a little more on that and also how that would relate to ISO 9000 and 14000 in general. I think given where we're at, it'd be good to also just touch base and review ICT. You know, here as I'm recording this on July 1st, maybe a couple weeks ago, it seemed that we were coming maybe out of ICT audits, and depending on what news channel you watch, we may be continuing for longer than we first anticipated. So just want to review some things related to that. And then also in this track, I want to go through and talk about some scheduling confirmation items, just some good practical scheduling tips, and then review a few overall other just general topics. So like the first track, I will break this track down into 2 different segments. I think it makes it easier to, if I keep it in, somewhere in a 30 to 40 minute partition as far as doing one half of it than doing the other. So we'll go through the first 12 slides or so and stop this particular section, and then we'll move forward and do the second section. Okay, thank you. So BOSS is our new business operating system. It has been implemented in February for the automotive cell. Thought that was probably the most controlled environment for implementation and trial. And then in April, it moved on to the aerospace. Again, both of those business sectors have databases that require information outside of Smithers. So felt that those were the best first 2 places. We continue to meet, we continue to learn, we continue to improve the inputs to the BOSS system. For the ISO cell, it is planned to begin sometime in mid-July. This beginning will consist of kind of a trial phase. It'll involve the back office, myself and Janine and Tiffany from the OSCs, and then a selected group of auditors will participate. And again, the goal is just to apply it to our cell, apply it to the 9001 formats mostly, but also 14,000, excuse me. And then also just get feedback. So I would look for auditor training sometime later in July. One of the things that we're currently doing now, as far as this being a little more delayed, is that we're revising some of the template structures. The overall plan is to have templates available in BOSS. There was a beginning structure for that. It was found out that it wasn't as robust or working as well as they had hoped. They have since taken on a new format for that, and it appears to be working much better. So again, we're not adverse to learning and improving as we go. I can tell you that this first phase of BOSS is well on its way, as you see, and phase 2 is already being planned. So as we build this foundation and begin using BOSS throughout our business sectors, there's already improvements and further additions being planned for later this year into next year. Another big stumbling block right now, in fact, I have a meeting later today on multi-site structures. I think historically, as we use SalesLogix to input clients and track clients over the history, it seems like SalesLogix inputs go back to 2008, 2009, multi-sites have been inputted many different ways, and there's not one right way or wrong way. SalesLogix is more of a customer, CRM type program, but we kind of forced some of this multi-site in there. In some cases, each site has its own project number. Some cases, each site has its own account. And we're really taking extra time so that when we put this into BOSS, we have a clear understanding. We set up all the accounts the same way, and we make it, understandable and consistent across. But I think, some of the auditors that have some of these multi-sites, some of the auditors that's been around, I think you can appreciate that there's a lot of historical information here that has not been conveyed in one structured format, that we're trying to assess it, mold it, or move it into the BOSS structure and do it in such a way that makes sense and fits into an overall scheme. So that is one of the bigger stumbling blocks right now. Also, there's notifications. BOSS, you're going to hear me talking in the coming slides about notifications. This needs done, or this wasn't done, or when is this done? And the timing on these notifications are being revised based on the different structures. IETF has certain windows that an audit must be within, and aerospace has different. ISO has some less constricted ones, but from a business, we still want audits to happen within a certain window and repeat in an annual cycle. So we're still working on some of those. Again, we have weekly meetings, and I can assure you there's a lot of effort between Aaron, Colin, and the team on the outside that's doing the actual writing. Hands-on by our team, and frequent touch points and meetings to make sure that this is a positive, much improved way to convey and operate our business. So ISO folks, please look forward. It's coming soon, and we'll work through it and welcome your input. So auditor schedules are a big part of BOSS. The next slide that I'm going to show actually is a snapshot of an auditor schedule, but I wanted to go over some things. The BOSS calendars will replace Outlook calendars. I only have Outlook calendars for a fraction of our auditors. So anytime we want to talk about a new client, or we want to talk about reassigning something, it starts an email train. Do you have this, or what about this date, or could we move this here? If I had a calendar for everybody, and that calendar would not only show me their availability, but also show me potentially where they are at, it would be quite an improvement and a time saver. One of the big things we like to emphasize is you may be busy, but if I consider you to be based in Detroit or Chicago or wherever you may live, but you're on an audit in Tennessee and have availability, generally I can persuade a customer to take those dates because you are in that area. And now we're splitting, auditor expenses across multiple clients, and I'm making your trip then have more than one, piece of business. Now, instead of going, traveling 2 days to do 2 days work, maybe you travel 2 days or a day, a day and a half, and you get 3.5 or 4 days work. So I'm very excited about the BOSS calendar portion. As you will see in this example, it can show me your schedule date. It shows me availability. It also is a way to show, hey, I'm not available. I know a lot of you that are hearing this are contract auditors. We know that you audit for other people, and we're not wanting you to tell us who you're auditing for or who your other clients are. We just want to know that you're not available. And it's that simple. You can mark it unavailable. And the other thing is once we put audits into your calendar, there's a direct link then into the client file. So you can click on it, goes into the client file, and you can access information. So I think that's a welcome change for you as auditors as well. This is an example. I know it has a lot of red And the reason being that this is a particular IATF auditor. So the green are audits that she has. Actually, the red is mostly SQA audits, but they're ISO audits. So since they're not as part of that actual sector, she showed those on her calendar, showed it as unavailable. So again, if you're a contract auditor that audits for other CBs, you could just show those as unavailable. And I could look at this and say, okay, there's some open time here. There's an open time on the 9th, whatever the case may be. And then it also lists your events. It shows them kind of in a different form rather than just a calendar. So this is just a snapshot or a screenshot out of one page, but I thought it would just be a good overview to give you a hands-on or a first view of what is going to be possible in BOSS. And again, this is just scratching the surface. Notifications, as I mentioned in a couple slides ago. BOSS is going to be structured for, did things happen? Did they happen on time? Did we know something is due? Through a series of dashboards. So the OSCs as well as auditors, it'll tell you you've got a scheduled audit. It'll tell you, hey, you haven't sent this audit plan in, because when you do, you go in and you check the box and say, okay, I've completed that. When you complete an audit, you check a box. I did the CRW, I put the report. Those things, if you don't do one of them, it shows that is still an item left to complete. So whether it's the audit plan, the audit dates pop up, audit documents, certificate expirations. We've had a few times, especially with some newer, less experienced people, where they schedule a recert audit for next year, and it's either after or within a few days of when the cert expires. This will pop up and tell you, hey, that's too close to the cert expiration date. From a back office standpoint, if there is an auditor competency issue, if you haven't been qualified in a certain IAF code or technical area for medical, as soon as that audit is assigned to you, it comes up and tells us, then we have to circle back, make sure we attain the proper IAF code test, or in a medical case, if it's something you're not competent for, we have to assign another auditor. Even within the witness audit, the witness audits are a requirement. They are a 17021 requirement that Smithers has to do witness audits. It is a little different from cell to cell. So we can customize that based on the auditor and the requirements. But when somebody is past due, it comes up and it tells us. We don't have to run a spreadsheet. We don't have to dig back through records. It's programmed in. It comes up on the screen and tells us this needs done. So again, the next slide actually has a kind of a list of, and this is just part of the notifications, but this is, an example of a dashboard that each one of these you could click on, and then it would go into and show, okay, what do I owe as far as final action? What do I owe as far as a document? If you submit an audit report and the ECP or OSC finds an issue with something in your report, they reject the document, you'll get a notification. So it's very notification driven, and it allows us to set up these dashboards and see right in front of us as we go into the program on our screen, what is it I have to do? What needs my attention? It puts them in order of dates, and you don't come in and work on the ones in September when you have ones to do next week in July. So it's really going to focus people's attention. It's going to highlight the things that need done, and also, act as an assurance that we complete the activities that need completed and respond to customers, on time, and get packages done, get certs sent. So a lot more coming. Again, we're not going to drop this on you. There will be training. Colin does a nice job. And again, he's had trained 2 sets of auditors already. So each time we add a little more to the program. And I think as we go and roll this out for ISO, it'll be different, but it'll have a more modern, more more current form to it as far as our program. Another thing in the business operating system, the new BOSS system, is kind of a reference library. So there will be documents related to the specific standards. So if you're doing an ISO audit, the check sheets, the audit date tables will be in there. You don't have to go out into SharePoint anymore. And I think a big thing for auditors that I hear a lot of questions about is the audit templates. And as I said in the first part of this, we are starting to work with a new template generator. So far, it looks very good and easier to use and fits our needs. So as this gets completed and we implement this into the ISO cell, you go in to do an audit, plan your audits out in advance. You can actually get your own audit report, audit plan, and it will still pre-populate, many of the client-specific fields. So I think that's going to be a welcomed addition also that current SalesLogix does not have, as far as somebody sending you the template and did I get the right one, and it'll all be right there for you to retrieve. They're also, again, BOSS is going to be a complex system. It has a lot of moving parts. So Colin does a nice job of putting together reference documents. So in that library, there will be reference documents available. Some of the stuff you're going to use every day, but there's other features within BOSS that you may not use every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks. You're going to say, oh, shoot, how do I do that? That's going to be available, that you can go in, kind of get a how-to, say, okay, yeah, I remember I was trained on this, but I haven't used it. So those will be available. And I can tell you, we're always looking at additional information. What else can we apply to this and make available for our auditors? And again, that's where your suggestions will come in. And we're already starting to look and be open to that as we have our trainings and have our discussions weekly. It's like, oh, what about that? Can we put that in BOSS? Can we make that available? So I will say this, at this time, copies of the actual standards will not be available. It's not that we don't want to do that. It's not that we want to keep those from you, but they are very copyright protected. And there's just no way at this time for us to put those up and make them available across without running a pretty realistic risk of copyright infringement and the accessing of fines. So at this time, audit standards of, a copy of the 9001 2015 will not be on there. Okay, so enough about BOSS. More to come, especially in our sector. Look for some announcements and some training emails about those things. Also, from a training perspective, we touched on a little bit from the internal audit findings, but it's the idea of certification scopes. And this is something that I wanted to spend some time on. It's not anything that we've really talked a lot about. Again, we have people that's been with us for going on 20 plus years, and we've got people that's auditing for us that's been here a few months. So given the wide spectrum and the fact that we are able to convey this to all auditors, we wanted to take an opportunity and spend time with the wording on the as it's described in the applicable IAF documents. As we talked about in track 1, MD9 is pretty clear. The certification body shall precisely document the scope of certification. Not a lot of gray area there. I think in 17021, which applies to 9001, 14,001, 45,000, it is a little more open. I'll be nice and say that. So taken strictly right out of 17021, it says the scope of certification with respect to type of activities, product, and services as applicable at each site without being, and I like this word, without being misleading or ambiguous. I like the misleading. You shouldn't read the scope statement in a certificate and then go do an audit and say, wait a minute, that's not what they do. That's not, that doesn't fit. And I think that's just a good general guideline. To me, in layman's terms, when I talk to the OSCs or some of the salespeople, sometimes I get an RFQ or an application to do business, and I look at the scope statement and I just send it back to them and said, what does that say? That don't tell me anything about what they do. So I think ISO wants us to be specific, but it does not give the wording, the word precise that the medical document dictates in the scope of certification. But I wanted to take an opportunity and spend a little time on this. I think what I'm planning to do is I have this document listed at the bottom of this slide that Jeanette found. It is a good reference document as far as scopes. But before I send that out, it's something I want to point out is within that document and within many documents, if you pick up 17021 or any of the MDF documents or even a copy of the standard, the word scope is very overused because it basically says when you pick up a document and it gives us a scope statement, it's basically saying, what does this apply to? And again, that's my layman's term definition. So, you know, QMS, a quality management system for a client, has a scope. You know, your audit your audit plan is kind of the scope of the audit. And what we're concentrating on here is the idea of the certification, the statement on the cert. What is that scope? What are we certifying? You know, what are we putting parentheses around? And I mean, you can read this at your leisure, but I think the one thing this slide's trying to point out is the scope of certification may be less than the actual scope of the quality management system. I know I have been on audits where within the facility they do different things, but we are only certifying a portion of that business. So again, to not be misleading, as stated in 17021, we want to make sure that the scope statement references the work that we're actually doing. And I know at times in some of the servicing related things, some of the government related ones, it's a little tricky because are we certifying the work? Or are we certifying the management of, you know, more of a project management status? And I think a lot of times it's tough for us when a client just fills out an RFQ, you got to pick up the phone or you got to talk to you as the auditor. You're on site doing that first initial stage one, and we need to ask those questions. What are we certifying? And when we look at it, you know, is it telling us enough? I think a lot of cases were pretty vague. In some cases, maybe there's some words in there that really don't need to be there. So this is the beginning of a guidance statement, and it references a nice guidance document that I plan on sending out. This is more from that same document. Again, you can read through it, but it basically says, you know, to avoid confusion, we want to focus on what's been certified, and the scope should define the types of products or services, kind of like I said, their main functions, and how it relates to, you know, again, if there's more than one site. I think the intention here, and I'm going to give this a little more, I'm not going to say that even a very big percentage of our scope statements need revised. I'm not saying that. So I think as you audit, you know, typically anytime I've been on audit with any of you guys, one of the things you do is you go out in the lobby and you pull down the certificate. You check the dates, you make sure it's the right certificate. Again, in track one, we kind of went through that there's 5 dates on there and what they mean. And, you know, as you do the audit and you look at that scope, you know, maybe they don't do everything they used to do, or maybe they've added processes. In that case, maybe it is applicable to modify the scope statement. I don't know. Again, I'm not there. ECP isn't there. That's where you've got to tell us, leave us the notes, give us the information so that, again, moving forward, we have a correct document that fits what that client does. So again, more from that reference document that I'm going to send out. I think this is the important slide here going. Scope statements, the path forward, we are already reviewing all of the 1345 as part of the corrective action. We call it a ticket inside SQA. A ticket has been issued on scope statements for 1345. Our intention is to revise obvious scope errors. Again, I do not intend to open Pandora's box here. We have had one recent ECP pushback on a scope statement for ISO, and it was pretty obvious. The particular client had a sentence that was perfect. I think it was a well-written scope statement. But then there was a second sentence that went on about a business philosophy that really didn't fit and really shouldn't have been part of the certificate's scope statement. Now, the thing I'm going to ask here, I may need your help. I have found that part of the problem is somebody's had a particular scope statement for 6, 8, 10 years, and they come back and they're like, well, I've had that all this time. What's wrong with it? And I want to take a positive spin on it. So we're just trying to better define their certification and what they do. In cases where we have the words like, and I don't think we have much of this, but world class or best in class or best rated, things that are marketing statements, those don't belong in a scope statement. The other thing that I know we have a few of that I'd like to get away from is the scope statement starting with the client name. ABC metal stamping does this, this, and this. Well, ABC metal stamping is already up on the certificate. That's at the top. So the scope statement basically should be a statement directed towards the activities and the processes and the products that are taking place within the facility. So those are the two things I think, again, I am not planning on revising 1,000 certificates. If we revise 10 or 15, I'll be shocked. I mean, I'm not trying to go around and redo every one of them. I'm asking you to be on the lookout for them, and I want to plan on addressing, as I said, obvious errors within the ISO scopes, things that are just basically aren't true, and things that mostly are more geared towards, they can put all kinds of marketing statements that, on their website, put them on a banner or hang them on a flag. I want the scope statement to be reflective of the operations, processes, products that are going on, and the covers, that we've audited and said the system that produces these, this is what it is. So I don't mean to belabor it, but I think from a training perspective, every once in a while I get a question from an auditor. It's obvious that maybe ANAB is starting to look at this a little closer. And I think it's something we've just kind of not really talked about for a number of years. And this is my 4th year of this, and it's something we really haven't addressed. And we thought this year would be a good opportunity to do so. So with that being said, I think we're halfway through track 2. So I'm going to stop here, and then we'll pick up and finish track 2 in the next session. Thank you for your attention.